Welcome to Coffee Talk, brought to you by Hyatt Commercial.
I'm your host, Justin Mullen, where industry executives talk leadership, culture, and commercial real estate. Grab your coffee and let's talk business. Thanks for joining us today. We're back with the Coffee Talk podcast for Hyatt Commercial. I've got a great guest with me today, Constance Palamalu. Constance, we like to start these conversations off asking kind of a little bit of a challenging question right up here at the front, but how would you describe your leadership style if you had to do it in one or two words?
I appreciate that you gave me a heads up here. I don't know if that's a spoiler for everybody, that it's not totally on the spot.
Yeah, we try not to be
challenging
100% on the spot, but I do like to give everybody a little bit of time because the answers I've been getting have just been really cool.
Yeah.
Like really interesting and well thought out.
Yeah, so I thought about it, and I think I'm going to go with cultivator. Cultivator in the sense that, if people are like the plants, I'm not important enough to be the sun, the water, or the soil. But as the cultivator of our company, I can look at our people and identify, okay, this person might be better in this type of sunlight. And so, kind of move them over. Or, I can see if somebody's growing into someone else's space. Like, okay, well, do they belong in that space? Or should we trim them back so they can grow stronger in a different direction? That's kind of how I like to think of it, is that our people are going to grow in whatever ways they are fostered to do so, and at whatever rate they choose to.
Yeah, I think that's another really thoughtful and excellent answer. At the end of the day, for almost everybody that I've spoken to on the podcast, it really has been about like leading people, putting them in a place that they can succeed. And that falls right into the same category there. I think cultivator, that's not one that I anticipated, but another great response and a good way to start our conversation. So again, I'm with Constance Palamalu. Constance is the Chief Operating Officer at Zachary's Jewelers, which is downtown Annapolis. Additionally, Bloomstone Jewelers, which is also in Annapolis, but in a different location. And we'll kind of come back to the two different brands and how you got there. But we like to also start out with, now that you're the cultivator, how did you get there? What's your background? Start as young as you'd like. We did have a good conversation last week. We've known each other, as I was just saying, for 10 years. Really just in the last few years have gotten to know each other, partially through business. Certainly appreciate your business, letting us help you with some expansion stuff, and also through both of our families being at the same schools and crossing paths, in that sense. So I know you grew up in Las Vegas, but let's start there. Give us your background.
Sounds good. So I am the daughter of an NFL player who my parents had me while they were in high school. So that means that I went to college with my parents. And then when my dad was drafted, I was actually old enough to remember that. So my earliest memories are really in football stadiums and in, effectively show business. So people don't always think about the fact that sports, as we know them, professional sports, are really, it's show business. There's something about it. It's entertainment. And so there are a lot of similarities and a lot of crossovers. And growing up, I didn't really know much other than that. My family, because my father made his money playing in the NFL, we didn't come from money. We didn't come from a lot of opportunity outside of that. So I didn't really know much else. Like, my dad was the richest person in our family for all intents and purposes. And if you know a little bit about the economics of sports, he was like the lowest paid in the league, which means that your dentist probably makes more money annually than my dad did. But they kind of gave a framework of opportunity for me to grow up seeing have not and haves. But the only way that I knew how to do that was in entertainment. So growing up, I just kind of assumed, well, I can't play football, so I must need to be like an actor or a dancer or like singer or some kind of performer, because that's how people make money.
And a lot of that was based around the fact that your childhood was in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, that too.
Everybody around you.
Everybody in Vegas.
Performing in some
kind
way,
of performer.
Right?
Yeah. Whether they're a cocktail waitress or, Vegas is a show, everybody contributes to the show.
Yeah. Well, and when we talked last week, I mentioned to you too, like, I grew up in Annapolis, and my dad was a CPA. My mom worked at McGarvey's and was the general manager there forever. And when I was a little kid, that's where I kind of grew up. And then the wealthiest people I knew were lawyers or the guy that owned the trash business or a contractor. And like, I didn't know there was this whole other world of corporate America and finance and all these things. And even when I went to the University of Virginia, I didn't really know that until I graduated. Looking back on it, it's like, duh. But
Yeah.
yeah, so for you, it was like the pro sports and entertainment was at the core of your childhood, right?
Yeah, so that was really all that I knew. And so growing up, people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I would, oh, I want to be an actress. And I always admired actresses, though, who were like Jennifer Lopez. She's not really that great of an actress, but she always had a lot of other business activities going on. And so I figured, well, I don't have to really be that great, but that can be kind of the catalyst for having other businesses. And so I went to school for theater and mass communications down at Loyola, and that didn't really work out.
Before you move on from that,
Yeah.
because I do want to come back to that, but at a young age, were you thinking business mindset? Okay.
Yeah, I always had notebooks, and I actually, before I knew to call it brand development, I would journal and draw, and I would say, I'm going to have a business, and all of the cars are going to have purple interior, and all of the, and it was always about having businesses. But in my mind, the only pathway to get there was to become famous and then build the businesses around.
And so it was really the brand side of it what caught your attention. That's one of the other things that I find interesting is, what was the earliest kind of entrepreneurial venture that you remember? Anything interesting there? For me, I remember buying blow pops and airheads and selling them in the hallways of fourth grade.
So my brother did that because that was a good way to make money. Mine were more, I was a little shy to say that I wanted to be an entrepreneur growing up. So most of it was in my journals. But I would say the first time that I really got a taste of hustling to make something of myself was I was a Polynesian dancer. So I was the hula dancer at a lot of luau's in Las Vegas and California. And some of the companies would pay you to be a dancer, but then you could also sell flower leis for extra money. And you would basically keep a split of it. So they would say, okay, here are 20 leis, go into the restaurant and see if you can sell them.
So you were an independent contractor.
Exactly. I was independent contracting to sell these flower leis. And the deal was in Vegas, and I was like lying about my age so that I could work in Margaritaville on the strip at 16, 17. So I would get the flower leis from the company, and they would say, okay, you have to turn in $5 per flower lei to come back and get your next batch. But there was no like real requirement of how much money I had to charge or could charge. So if somebody would give me $20 for a flower lei, like I got to keep $15. And so
that's a quick way to learn business math right there.
It was really quick. It was like a really good way. It was a good introduction that I didn't realize was an introduction at the time to, okay, what will the market bear?
Yeah. And it's funny because you talk about journaling. And I also remember I was definitely more of a like, let me just go do kind of an entrepreneur at that age. But I do remember really thinking like and being excited in the thinking part of the business. Like in journaling, I assume it's kind of the same. Like you get excited just writing down what your ideas are. Setting that aside, let's go back to, when you decided it was time to go to higher education. Go get back into that story.
Yeah, so it was the year after Katrina, and Loyola in New Orleans was throwing money at people. Now, remember, I didn't come from a family with a lot of money, and by that point in my life, my dad's career in the NFL was done. So we were back to not really having a lot of resources, but they offered me a scholarship for theater. There were a couple of schools that had done so, but they were the only one that had a really strong mass communications program as well. And so even then, a small part of me knew that I didn't really want to be an actress. And so going to a school where I could have a double major in theater and mass communications seemed to make sense, because then I would have the opportunity to maybe work more in communications.
Very similar to an athlete that's using their sport to get into the
Exactly. So. It was like all that I knew. And that was the only pathway. My dad was the first person to go to college in his family and who had gone to school any other way. And the idea of financing my education really didn't make any sense to me, because I didn't know anybody who knew how to move money around.
Yeah. So you went to a place that offered you an opportunity.
Exactly.
So based on our discussion last week, what happened there?
I didn't like it. I didn't like any of it. I knew it became really clear to me once I got into college level courses that one, I didn't really like them. And two, I really, really didn't want to be in theater or mass communications. I wanted something where people were going to take me more seriously. And I was tired of being at that point. So this was pre Me Too. And not to get into a ton of it, but I was just kind of tired of really skating by because I was relatively attractive to most people.
Mhm.
So I wanted something more serious under my belt. And I had some money at UNLV because I had graduated with a certain GPA in Las Vegas. So I went back there and I said, okay, I'm going to study business. And in order to study business, I had to take Common Core science and math classes, which since I had gone to we didn't touch on this yet, but I had gone to a high school for performing arts, majoring in theater. And since I was a theater major going that route, I wasn't required to take as many science classes as other students. So I hadn't taken a science class since sophomore year of high school, basically. And same with math, because I had taken higher education, like I had taken high school math classes in middle school. And by the time I got to high school, I had kind of completed most of my required courses.
So it's been 3, 4, 5 years since you had really
Been
done
too
that.
many years.
So
to
how
really
did you
do that.
select the course?
Oh, they go. I'm sitting with the course selection team at UNLV, and they're like, "Well, we've got this class, and we kind of call it Rocks for Jocks. It's geology. It's where we put basically all the dumb kids." And I'm like, "Well, that sounds like me, right? Like I want to major in entrepreneurship because I know I want to own my own business someday. But really, I'm no different than the jocks."
It's funny in Virginia, a lot of the jocks would take like scene design or set
Right,
design.
exactly.
Like, yeah.
So the same kind of thing. So the no-brainer science class for me to take was geology. And that's when I really started to realize that I love rocks. But actually not all rocks, just the sparkly ones.
Yeah.
And planetary tectonics, that was cool. And geologic information systems modeling, that was cool. And occasionally now that the few courses that I took in that are helpful, like when I want to decide where to open a new
Yeah,
business,
exactly.
I at least have some, I know some of these words, as they say on the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it became really clear that was actually what I liked was gemology. And that kind of led me down a path of looking for, well, how do I run my own business having to do with rocks and gems and importing and exporting and maybe utilizing some of my other skills of, being able to draw and be creative. So that was the impetus of it. And then I got really lucky and met a few people along the way that set me down a different path to actually get into the industry.
And one of the things that you mentioned to me when we spoke previously was that as you were discovering your interest in that, you created a story about what your future kind of looked like.
Oh,
And
yeah.
at the time, you probably it sounded like you used it just as like a, hey, what are you going to do with your life? Oh, I'm going to be in the jewelry business, and you didn't know what that meant or where it was going to go from there. But like, it's funny because just having a story
Yeah.
helped shape a lot of your future, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's so true. So to give context, as a storyteller who had grown up going to, entertainment opportunities, theater shows, all of this, I was very well versed in creating a story, telling a story, making it compelling, and finding the ways that you could tell a story so that people would be satisfied, but also not have any follow-up questions. And so that really helped me answer the question of what are you going to do when I had no idea. And it became, a small part of it was true, and the best stories and the best lies are always a little bit true,
yeah,
right?
of course.
The funniest jokes are the most true ones. It's like I had at least
We used to, my high school buddies and I, we would always joke around like, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
right.
That's
right.
like,
No.
there's some truth in there.
There's
It may
some
not be
truth.
100% true, but you got to enjoy the story. So,
Exactly.
all right. So back to your path now. You talk about you had some mentors and you had some kind of chance interactions that really like allowed you to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Blaming how you ended up in New York and what your role was there. And I think that kind of ultimately helps lead into what you're doing now, right?
Yeah. So I wind up getting a job in a Las Vegas jewelry store, and pretty quickly my skills of being able to sketch come in handy at the counter, helping with custom design. And then I get sent to a trade show where I get recruited to go on air and sell jewelry on TV, going back to those days of entertainment and mass communications, it made sense. Somebody said, hey, we're looking for faces to go on TV and sell jewelry. Do you think that's something you can do? And I was like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
This is actually something I am very well prepared for. So I got to New York to do that. And then they had recruited me just for my face and ability to speak on camera. But what they found was that I could actually sketch and develop my own line. So from there, I wound up in Chinese factories, creating product, building brands for other on-air personalities. And pretty quickly, I was responsible for coming up with like 1,200 new samples every quarter so that our sales team could go out and sell jewelry to the majors, to other brands and packages that were, really vehicles of moving more product.
And knowing the role you're in now, I'm guessing that was a much higher volume, probably, I don't know if lower quality is the appropriate way to, but certainly a higher volume type business than what you're at Zachary's now. Kind of make the leap there. Like, how did you go from that to then ending up in Annapolis and, being at Zachary's?
Yeah, so the first store that I was in was really high end. They had a lot of nice jewelry. My biggest sale there was like an $80,000 yellow diamond in my first year of selling, which is only possible if you're in the right environment. And I didn't really like the quality of jewelry that I was producing in my career in New York. It was lower quality. That's accurate. And that's something that people don't always understand when they come into Zachary's, for example. Why are 1 carat diamond studs so much more expensive at Zachary's than at Macy's? Well, there's a severe quality difference.
Yeah.
So I had that background. And then I fell in love with somebody who was playing football at the Naval Academy. And he kept asking me to move. And I kept saying, yeah, no, I don't want to move. Like, we don't have to break up, but I'm not
New York
moving.
City to Annapolis. That's, for somebody that's not from Annapolis, that can be
I didn't really know much about Annapolis. At that point, I just knew that when I came in town on the weekends to see my boyfriend, we would bar crawl from Acme to Dock Street. And I didn't really see a future for myself here, but we end up getting engaged. And because I had been saying, no, I'm not going to move because we're not married, as soon as I said yes, his assumption was that, well, then you're going to move to Annapolis.
Good man.
And I was like, yeah, I see how we got here. But I didn't know anything, right? Because I dropped out of school twice to get into jewelry. I didn't know anything other than jewelry at that point. So I looked at the landscape and I said, well, on Main Street, there are 4 or 5 jewelers and a bunch of restaurants. And those are the only 2 things that I'm really qualified to do. I can either sell jewelry for somebody or I'm going to have to wait tables. So I took my resume to Main Street, and Steve Samaras and Evangeline Ross hired me pretty much on the spot.
Very cool. And obviously, you moved to Annapolis, you work in the store for a period of time.
Yeah, 6 months. That's it.
So it was only 6 months, right? And then life took you elsewhere, being married to somebody in the Navy. What was that next step?
Yeah, so I had started at Zachary's in sales, just general sales, nothing else. But Evangeline and Steve were really great leaders who recognized quickly that I had more to offer the business and that maybe it needed to be a little bit more creative than a traditional path. So on the last day, what I thought was going to be my last day at Zachary's, which is actually the day that you were talking about when we were first chatting about
so that was
Christmas Eve, 2015.
Right,
I think it's going to be my last day, and I walk in to tell Steve goodbye, and I had a great experience. So I was kind of expecting, maybe a hug or a nice parting words, because I was upfront from the very beginning that I was only going to be here 6 months. And he just said, oh, no, this isn't goodbye. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. I was like, super cryptic. I don't know what that means, but okay, great.
At this point, I think it's, helpful to lean into kind of who Steve Samaras is, what Zachary's is, and like the culture of that business at that time. It sounds like for somebody that was only there for 6 months, they clearly saw something really great, and you must have seen a culture that you wanted to be a part of. Give a little description of the company then and now. I think it's probably very similar from a culture perspective.
For sure. So the first thing that really made me love Zachary's, aside from the fact that they welcomed me with open arms, hired me on this spot, is that Steve and Evangeline are brother and sister. So for those who don't know, they are brother and sister, and they have a great relationship. And I loved that. I came from a family, I have two brothers and a sister, and we're very close. And so to see another family that was really close and working together in this really idyllic store in this sweet town that I had come to love, it really felt like, oh, this is a nice place. These are
Yeah.
good people. I want to be in a nice place with good people.
Yeah. And again, sitting on the consumer, side of the discussion there, I grew up going to Zachary's with my dad on Christmas Eve every year. And when I was young, we were always picking up the white box with the red ribbon on it as a Christmas gift for my stepmom. And then as I got older, my brother had 4 daughters to start, and my dad started buying pearl necklaces for each of them. And each year he would add a pearl to it. And now I've got a daughter. And so my dad does. So I mentioned that because like that is the culture of Zachary's, is like people from all over the area, certainly Annapolis, but all over the area come there for really meaningful interactions. And like, it's not a place that you just go buy the, one-off piece of jewelry and that's it. It's like a place you keep coming back to, and they've created a real community around the store.
Yeah, and it's special. I grew up because my dad was in the NFL. We moved a lot. He was an offensive lineman, so he was traded frequently, and he had a long career. So he played for 11 years.
Wow.
Which means that we moved every 6 months because that's just how often he got traded. I actually went to 14 different elementary schools.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so a community like we have in Annapolis and at Zachary's was something that I never really had a strong exposure to, never really understood or felt the joy of. And, I tell my friends from Vegas, I'm like, no, I live in a Hallmark town now,
Yeah.
and my life is great. But
Funny. Yeah. No, it's funny because like when you grow up here, you don't know any different. And, as people move here, you continue to hear the same kind of stories. Like, I came not knowing what was going to be here, and I stayed because of this community that's here.
Yeah, it's really special for those who don't know or don't recognize it. It's a really pleasant surprise when you get here and you start to get integrated. And your family is actually one of the families that made me feel like, oh, this really is a great place. Like seeing your dad come in and having to wrap all the first time I met your dad,
Yeah.
I was wrapping all of those pearl
Yeah.
necklaces and getting the explanation of, yeah, he comes in every year. He's got 4 granddaughters. And so they all have different boxes. And I remember having to write the different names for the boxes, just tuck them away so that he could give them out on Christmas. And that's just tradition and legacy. That's what Zachary's is all about.
And one of the things that I really love about Annapolis is, like my dad and Steve grew up together. They kindly refer to each other as like cousins, but Mullen is Irish and Samaris is Greek. And like, that's the town. Like everybody that grows up here feels like there's extended family in different places. And that is generational too, which is always, really fun for me. And like, I try and make sure my kids feel that too,
Yeah, it's cool. Like when we see each other at the soccer fields.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So back to kind of your path to now being the chief operating officer. So you move away from Zachary's in 2015. You spend, how many years were you gone?
5.
So 5 years
Well, 4 and
in
a
a
half.
role that's not 100% in store doing sales, or I'm sure you were doing some design, but I think a lot of what you were doing was on the business side of it and getting to understand like the operations of Zachary's. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think when you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, you hear a lot of people talking about you've got to work on the business, not in the business. And in retail, that's extra hard to be operating the business and working on it, not in it. So being removed ended up being like a cheat code for us, because here we knew the end goal was that I want to come back and that, Steve Samaras needs a transition plan. Like we need to figure this out. My dream at that point had become to own my own store. And even before realizing how great Annapolis was. So having that forced time away was really great for me and the business, because it gave us an opportunity to say, okay, Steve is running the business. Constance has to work on the business.
Yeah.
And then circle back, in the mornings, which was 5 a.m. my time in California, 8 a.m. for Steve,
Yeah.
so that we could sit down and have business meetings
Before
about
the
the business before the store
yeah.
opened, which is a little backward from
It is
most people.
it's interesting because certainly it's challenging not to be in the store, like hands getting dirty in the
Yeah,
process. But on the flip side of that, like a lot of business owners, will work from home for a few hours a day or for a few
right.
hours during the week,
Yeah,
or they get into their office, whatever it may be, hours ahead of their staff for that exact reason. Like they
right,
want to be able to work on the business.
right.
Okay, so you get 5 years where you're really, working operationally. What led you back to Annapolis and
Yeah.
and now, catch us up to speed on the last, 5 years or so.
Yeah, so my husband's service commitment was up. When you go to the Naval Academy, most people in this area know that you owe 5 years back. So his service commitment was up, and Steve said, "All right, you coming home?" I said, "Never really thought of Annapolis as home before, but I also never really thought of anybody anywhere else as home." Okay, yeah, Annapolis, that's a good home. And so we bought our house in 2019, and I show up in November of 19 to really lean into the role of chief operating officer with this massive 5-year plan of how we're going to, meet all of these great benchmarks. And, step one is have a sale and, kind of rebalance some of our inventory. Well, that takes time to plan. And 2 days into the sale, we get shut down for COVID.
Welcome back.
Oh, welcome.
That was an interesting time for all of us in the retail world in particular. Literally was shut down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Annapolis, went from being a bustling holiday town to January slow as is, February slow as is, and then all of a sudden in March, the whole world shuts down.
Yeah.
And as a COO, I got to imagine you had to learn some lessons really fast, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It was rough, but I think the first thing that made me fall more in love with Zachary's and really solidified that I had made the right choice was our first day into being shut down. We have this management call. It's me, Steve, Evangeline, Doug, our business coach, I think, was on the call at that time. And we're going, okay, well, what are the most important things? And Steve says, we have to pay our people. We have to make sure that everybody's whole financially because we don't know what other employers are doing. We know that our members of our team, what they contribute needs to stay the same. And Evangeline said, I want to make sure nobody goes crazy. So I want to have a daily call to make sure that we're checking in on everybody, that everybody's mentally well. And then Steve and Charlie would deliver meals to our team members. They kind of set up this rotation. They said, well, we want to take food to our team. And we don't want to cook it. We want to buy it from local restaurants to make sure that we're supporting the local restaurants the best that we can. And then Steve made videos to the community, really kind of his love letter to Annapolis to make sure that everybody at home was happy, safe, healthy, fed. And I'm tearing up.
Well, I'll jump in then.
Yeah.
So I do kind of remember that Steve doing that, like putting it out publicly that he was doing that. And similarly, it would have been December of 21 is my guess. It may have been 20, but whenever the world had kind of reopened, we hosted our first like holiday kind of entertainment event downtown Annapolis. It's changed names so many times now. It was Factors Row, I think, at the time. What is it now? It's the it used to be Reardon's.
Yes, it's the Pearl
the
now.
Pearl now.
Yeah.
So the second floor there. But the whole idea was we're gonna go buy gift cards from a bunch of Main Street shops and give them out as door prizes. And like we want it to be an open house where people come, enjoy themselves here, but then go out and spend money in the retail shops, which so yes, that is the community, that you guys live in and operate your business in. So now transitioning back to the business side of it a little bit, you get shut down. Steve's trying to take care of the community and take care of his people. But you being an operations person, your mind's probably spinning like, what are we going to do going forward?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of at the foundation of Bloomstone. And explain to us what Bloomstone is, how that came about. And so
Bloomstone Jewelers is an exclusively lab-grown diamond jewelry store here in Annapolis in the Harbor Center. Shout out to your team. George helped me secure the space. And that came about because during COVID, Everybody was at home, but emergency or necessary personnel could go into a business. So what we were doing is our whole sales team was at home reaching out to people like, hey, you still have a birthday coming up, or you still have an anniversary coming up, and you guys can't do anything else. Do you need our help? Do you need help making it special? And so while the sales team was doing that, I was in the store taking videos of things that they might need, packaging things up, and at the end of the day, I would deliver it to people's homes just to make sure that we still had some kind of
Yeah, that's
income
cool.
coming in. But for the most part, I was just sitting in a dark store by myself with my brain spinning. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how long this is going to be. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know for sure this is what I want in life and it can't fail. So I started running SWOT analysis on, okay, what are we strong in? Where are we weak? Where are the opportunities? What are the threats? And one of the biggest threats that was coming up at that point in time was lab-grown diamonds. And I thought, is this a threat? Is this an opportunity? Like, where do I place this? Because this isn't something that we're doing, but some of my counterparts in other cities were having a lot of trouble with it. It was really impacting their business. And so it gave me an opportunity to think and to press pause and, okay, is this good or bad? Not necessarily good or bad. It was the answer in the end. It just didn't fit for Zachary's. And so after having, going through and doing all of the checks and balances to make sure that Zachary's was not going to sell lab-grown diamonds, the opportunity arose to open a lab-grown diamond exclusive company because the market was there. It just wasn't Zachary's market.
Right. Just a different brand, a different clientele. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when did you open up that facility?
Gosh, that was years later. We actually just opened in 24 in April because it took that long to really assess how much was lab grown going to take up space wise. Like, how great was that opportunity? And, waiting out there, because there were some things early on that we noticed, which were part of some of the reasons why we knew we didn't want lab grown at Zachary's, was the price volatility. So I had some real concerns with the ethics behind how some of the lab grown diamonds were being priced and positioned in the marketplace. And so I wanted to wait that out a little bit and see. So we ended up coming into the market. We waited until they kind of hit rock bottom price wise to then recalibrate so that we knew that we weren't selling people something that was going to be worth drastically less tomorrow.
Right. That's something I had not even considered.
Yeah. Because in the early days, people were selling lab grown diamonds based off of, they would say, okay, this diamond is similar to this natural diamond. This lab grown diamond is similar to this natural diamond. And so we'll sell it to you at a discounted price from that. And it started at like 10% less. But the cost basis is all out of whack because the cost to make a lab grown diamond is just time in a machine.
Yeah,
like,
right. So it's a commodity at that point,
yeah,
more than a precious gem. I
exactly.
mean, it's not still a precious gem, but the you wanted to wait for the market to balance out.
Wanted
so you knew
correct.
What the commodity
Exactly.
Was, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
Exactly. Because it's really more of a tech.
Yeah.
In some senses, where the same TV that you bought 4 years ago is now worth a lot less because we're making them bigger, better, cheaper all the time. Lab grown diamonds are similar to that.
Right.
And that, by its very nature, is incompatible with Zachary's and Zachary's mission, which is, in everything that we do, we ask ourselves, what more can we do to bring humanity to retail?
Yeah.
And then we have a culture of creating friends and turning customers into friends. It's hard for me to say to somebody, okay, well, on one hand, I'm selling you this diamond for your legacy. I know that there's 2 billion years of history behind this stone and it's going to hold value in some capacity, to then say, I also have this other thing that I don't know what's going to happen with it.
Right.
It might be worth nothing tomorrow.
Right.
It might be worth something, but it might not. There's really not a good historic basis for me to make this recommendation. And so it took time for, I think, consumers to really understand that difference. And now people are clear. I think people are really clear on what they want, what they don't want. There's a lot more real information out there. And so they can make their own decision. And there's nothing wrong with either decision.
Sure.
It's just, one fits within one business and one doesn't, and needs to be its own thing.
So with that in mind, let's now focus a little bit on, what your day-to-day role is at Zachary's. And I love that you just kind of commented on the culture and what you guys, your core values, even though you didn't call it that.
Yeah.
What is your day-to-day role now, and how do you kind of effectuate the core values and culture that certainly Stephen and his whole team and family have created over the years, and now you're helping to support and expand upon?
Yeah, right now I'm doing a lot of cultivating. So at Zachary's, we have a growing team. We've got more people in the back of house than ever before, and that was a big change. So 5 years ago, we still didn't have a super robust back of house team. And when I say back of house, I mean all of the people that keep the machine running that aren't your favorite salesperson.
Right.
Right. So most people in Annapolis know Erica. She's our star salesperson.
Yep.
She's like always there. She knows everybody by name. But as the business has grown, Steve and Erica can't do everything.
Right.
Errol can't do everything, right? So we've had to really change the business. And we chatted about this a little bit earlier, but as the daughter of an athlete, I think of it as there are different kinds of teamwork, and the size of your business might change what that looks like. So, when Steve and Errol started the business forever ago, now it was just them. They were like playing doubles, like tennis doubles, like back and forth. They were both doing everything. And then it grew to be more of a basketball team, and everybody's kind of doing a little bit of everything. And some people might be better at dribbling or shooting, but everybody's ultimately got the same core competencies. And now we've progressed into, we're really more of a football team where we've got an offense and a defense, and there are people concerned with scoring, and people concerned with making sure that nothing falls through the cracks and everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I think every small business that's trying to grow to become something bigger feels the challenges of that and the growing pains of that. And the way I've always described it to our team and externally is like, for 5 or 7 years, we grew just by brute strength. Like, just show up every day. I mean, literally one of our core values is entrepreneurial grit, which still holds today.
Yeah.
But when we created that, it was like, you show up and you do whatever it takes that day. And it was very much like everybody had similar capabilities, and we started to focus things. Certainly Gabrielle, who helps us run the podcast, has been a huge addition to going from brute strength or brute force to like really well thought out and focused energy and efforts and specialization. And it sounds like that's kind of where you guys are now as well, growing.
Yeah. And so as the operator, that's really my role, is to make sure that everybody's in the right seats on the bus. If you're an entrepreneurship book junkie, you've probably heard a lot of talk about, you got to get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. And that's kind of my role right now, is making sure that everybody's on the bus, belongs on the bus, is in the right seat on the bus, and doesn't need to like get off at another stop and get on a different bus.
Yeah, I noticed you use the term SWAT, and certainly that's something that is used frequently in business books and evaluating what you're doing. And so with all that being said, what does the future look like for the company? And again, your day-to-day role is managing all of the moving pieces of that. But like, give us a little bit of like what you're very specific, like what do your hours look like? You have a growing family, and how do you handle it on a day-to-day basis,
So I'm really fortunate because both of my children go to school really close to the store. So it's important to me to take them to school and pick them up, even though they don't stay with me. But that means that a lot of times I'm working before work, and a lot of times I'm working after everybody goes to bed. So I would say the hours are kind of never ending. Also, if
you're a business owner, like there are no hours. That's why I say, like, what does the day look like? Not like how many hours you're putting in, because it's very much like work for as many hours as you need to, do whatever you need to personally to get time in, and work more. And constantly, in particular, when you walk down the street, I'm sure people are grabbing you. And like my father-in-law being one of the who loves getting your opinion on custom made jewelry and interesting ideas. But with that being said too, like in this new role, do you find yourself like kind of scratching the itch of the creative side that you've had? Like how do you feel there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I definitely don't get to do as much of the creative as I would have probably hoped 10, 15 years ago. But there's a lot of creativity in trying to put together the right team and make everybody
the cultivator in you.
Yeah.
You get the creation is literally creating the whole team.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel. Like, I don't know that anybody's ever thought of me as like a creative,
but it's
my
creative.
imagination, has turned into creativity and growth and like building a team and like, what does that look like in 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that. Like, I believe in creative problem solving and creative ways for growth. And honestly, we've got such an awesome team right now. I love being able to go in and say, Sam, hey, Sam, he does all of he's our digital architect. I'm like, I had this idea. We're doing this thing in our CRM right now, and it would be so much better if. And then I walk away and I come back and he's like, hey, remember that thing you asked me about last Tuesday?
Yeah.
Well, I found a solution. I'm like, oh, amazing.
That is the most amazing feeling ever when
so
you
good.
come up with an idea, hand it off to somebody else, trust in their ability to get it done. And again, Gabrielle would probably confirm this. Like, you've, to a certain extent, forgot you even asked because you've moved on to something else. But when that comes back to you, it's like, that's a great feeling. So I get that. So, all right, we're kind of coming to an end here. If you looked out, and you don't need to give us necessarily specifics, but if you look out, 5-10 years out, like, where do you envision the brand and the company and yourself personally? What are you thinking there?
I think I'll be exactly where I am, still in Annapolis, but everything will be bigger and more robust. I have a lot of hopes and dreams for Bloomstone to be a different type of business, but that where we hopefully have more locations. And that's something, the beauty of being so busy with Zachary's is that I have to build that without me in the center of the universe, which means it's going to be more scalable as we kind of work through everything, having that, but also just continuing to grow Zachary's and get more ingrained in the community. I've been working with Gabrielle with Ladies of Commerce and kind of making more of a community and stepping in, because for a long time I was just an outsider, and now it feels like I'm starting to become a little bit more of the community, and having 2 small children is really good for that as well. So I jokingly tell people all the time, like, well, I just hope that in 15-20 years everybody wants to come to Auntie Constance like they go to Uncle Steve.
Well, it's funny you say that. For one, you are definitively not an outsider anymore. And 2, like, Hyatt Commercial is a long-standing brand in Annapolis as well, and we are growing substantially outside of our little local market here. But I still view myself as very much a steward of that brand, in particular locally, where there was 3 generations of Hyatts that have all been successful business people and just good people in the community of Annapolis. And I can appreciate kind of taking a brand like Zachary's and wanting to certainly influence it and put your own touch on it, but also like preserving the tradition and the kind of core of who you are there. So
I need your kids to remember that white paper, red ribbon under the tree means I went to Zachary's.
Of course. So with that, like, I appreciate you coming out today. Very insightful. You've got a fantastic business. You've got a fantastic family. And so I just really appreciate you doing this. And who knows, maybe we'll reconnect on something like this again in the future and get a little more detailed on some of the business and your role again. So, but I thank you.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Cool. Good work.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Coffee Talk with Justin Mullen. Topics on leadership, culture, CRE, brought to you by Hyatt Commercial. Until next time.